Lamborghini Diablo, which is the pinnacle, in my opinion, of Lamborghini success. The Countach was awesome, but it lacked some things. It's not my favorite. I do love them. And then after this came the Murcielago, which was also available in a gated manual. It makes just under 500 horsepower as a 5.7 liter naturally aspirated V12 engine with a gated manual transmission. For me, this car was super nostalgic, and just the body lines are overall beautiful, and the car meant a lot to me. For me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, this was a dream car. A lot of us had the poster on our walls, and acquiring one was just straight up a dream. A year or two ago, I finally was in a position to where I was able to think about buying one based on, where it was, what the spec was, condition. There's a lot of variables with cars like this. So I had put the word out to social media, not huge, that, I'm putting this out into the universe that I'm going to get one of these cars. And then I had also, reached out to a company or two. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for one of these if you know of anything, because, the production numbers in these cars, no matter what the spec, it was in the 2000s through the whole world. So you're trying to compete with the entire world to obtain one of these things. So when I had mentioned that I was looking for one, you just kind of wonder, what if? I mean, can you find one? If you do, is it in your price range? Is it in the condition you want? Is it in the spec you want? You can't be too picky. White cars are my favorite color, but I would have settled for a different color. There weren't a whole lot of options. I really, really like that cool pinkish purple shade that you guys have seen, but that holds a huge premium. Obviously there's SVs, there's SE30s, there's GTs, there's all these crazy specs. But this is the 1991 Lamborghini Diablo that had the iron Ate brakes. It had no power steering. It has no ABS. It is rear wheel drive. Later on, they added an all-wheel drive system, which some people weren't a fan of. So some people did actually delete theirs just for that, get a better driver feel. There's a number of reasons. This had the early interior. It's very basic. I mean, this was sort of groundbreaking for Lamborghini, in my opinion. It went over 200 miles an hour, and at one point, I believe it was the fastest production car in the world. So for this car to do that back in 1991 was huge. So the story of how I got the car, friends and whoever else knew that I was looking, and it had been late. Usually I stay up late. I'm a late guy. I'm a night hawk. So this was like the one night that I decided to go to bed at a reasonable time. And a friend of mine, Kevin, will probably see this, he had sent me a link to this car for sale in some private neighborhood group chat type Facebook group. It was a posting, and it was some guy who just listed the car, a price, a very brief description, some really bad photos. And of course I fell asleep. So I woke up to the message and I freaked out. I'm like, oh my God, I need this car. I messaged the guy, and it turns out that he was actually a younger guy. He was not the owner. He was selling it for a friend that doesn't have social media. So he was sort of just brokering the deal, helping the guy out. And I was like, hey man, I have to have this car. and he was, you know, kind of like, okay, I have a ton of people interested. You know, I got guys that want this thing. How serious are you? And I'm like, I'm dead serious. I'll load up my trailer, and I'll be there tomorrow. And this car was like in Alabama, so super long drive. It's like 15 hours or something. So he ended up talking with the actual owner of the car, and he got back to me. He's like, okay, man, let's do it. And later on, when I thought about it, he didn't even ask me for a deposit. And when I had asked him about it, he said, no, man, I could hear you in the background loading up your trailer. I could hear you, you know, doing what you said you were doing, and you were serious about coming to get this car. And I was. So I drove down. I got the funds together and drove down with my truck and trailer. Went down there with my enclosed, and I was like researching before I left. I'm like, will the Diablo fit? Because it's a super wide car in the back. The Aventador, the Lamborghini Aventador, is one of the widest cars ever built. I think at one point, or it might still be, it was the widest car produced. So I was wondering, I was like, okay, will this thing even fit between my enclosed trailer fenders? So we ended up driving out there, and I went with my buddy Alex, and we were just like mapping this location. And the neighborhood was, you know, not anything crazy. You know, it wasn't like a rich neighborhood where you're like, oh man, it's gonna be a mansion, this guy's gonna be loaded. And when I got the story from him, he basically said he went through a point in his life 10 or 15 years ago where he just said, screw it, I'm buying a Lamborghini, and he's getting his dream car. So that's what he did. He got this car from Chicago, and he had it ever since. He had done a few goofy things to it, which I thought were funny. He put like light up center caps on it from like, I think it was like Amazon. He put like a sticker on the door. If you open the driver's side door, there's like a sticker on it. It says, it's a middle finger, like a cartoon middle finger, and it says, I built it because I like it, not for you, or something like that. Super goofy. So we pulled up to the neighborhood, and it was just like a deep driveway. I walked down there, turned the corner, and the car was just sitting in his garage. And like, usually when I'm going to buy something, I'm like, I'm gonna inspect this thing. I'm gonna give it my green light. I'm gonna weigh the pros and cons, the price of the car, you know, what I have to do to make it right, because I'm a pretty picky person. I like to restore cars. I turned the corner, I didn't even assess, you know, the condition or anything, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to have this thing. Because I had maybe seen one or two Diablos in my whole life. So seeing one that I'm there to buy was just, it was incredible. And it was white, you know, it's the color that I would have dreamt of. I would have settled for anything. So we ended up working out a deal. He asked that he could drive it one last time. So he jumped in, drove it around with me in it. And then I jumped in and I drove it for the first time with him. And I was just blown away. I mean, it's old, it's super analog, and the power's there, the sound is there. It's a very raw feel driver's car. People ask me all the time, how is it? And it's kind of like a mixture of don't meet your heroes and holy crap, this thing is insane. So obviously there's a lot of flaws with it. This car came from a period, you know, where they were still figuring things out. And it was the very first run of them, basically. So the interior went through revision. So this one's super raunchy. You know, it's a square tube chassis. I mean, these things were like hand built. So it blows me away that the outside looks as good as it does, and then the inside is kind of like, this thing's not that great inside, but some people love it, some people hate it, but I've definitely learned to appreciate this car for what it is, and I definitely wasn't let down by any means in terms of being your dream car. I don't know if I could ever let it go. People ask me all the time, are you gonna sell? Are you gonna get rid of it? I'm like, there's no plans to. You never know. I mean, things happen in life, opportunities, but as of right now, I absolutely love this thing, and I foresee myself keeping it. Restoration wise, I went through a lot of restoration things that I felt were necessary. Just immediately came home, pulled the wheels off. The wheels needed to be cleaned up, mainly not super refinished or anything. I needed to replace like the OEM center caps that he had lost or whatever. Interior needed cleaned up, nothing crazy. Still, it's just hours and hours of meticulous work. I'd say the suspension was the biggest part. Suspension and brakes. So the first generation of these came with just a very simple iron Ate brake caliper. Brake seals fail and you get moisture and brake fluid on them and they rust. So for seeing like rust on a brake caliper on a car like this, you're kind of like blown away. Like, oh my gosh, this doesn't have big ass Brembos on it or anything. So I immediately pulled the brakes apart, and then finding parts isn't easy at all. Some things are super expensive and some things aren't. So immediately tore the brakes down, rebuilt all the brakes myself, blasted everything, got them re-zinc plated because a lot of this stuff came zinc plated from factory, and zinc is a good coating, but it does wear off over time and then you get surface rust. So I went through all the brake calipers, suspension, I sandblasted down a lot of the components, repowder coated, figured out a paint matching system to match that original, the original Coney yellow. It's like a school bus yellow. A lot of hardware stuff, just a lot of things to make the car a lot more presentable and make me happier, to make your dream car fit your expectations of how you think it should look. I mean, obviously we all want our car to look as nice as possible in most cases, so that's what I was doing. And I didn't even drive it until I did all that because I bought it when it was like snowy out. It all happened so fast too. Like the things that I assessed when I got home, obviously I hadn't even seen when I bought the car because I was just so excited. And that like rarely happens for me. I get super passionate and excited about cars, but this was something different. In terms of, maintaining the car, and just catching up with some of the things that he hadn't done yet, I wanted to remove a lot of the question marks and gray area in terms of doing what's right for the car, because there's a lot of measures you should take just to make sure that the car doesn't catch on fire. So immediately when I got home and did all the other suspension and brake components, I went into the engine bay, which a lot of people would be intimidated by, but I've been doing this for a long time and I basically have a full operating shop, so it doesn't intimidate me at all. When you get into something like timing chain tensioners and some of the more in-depth engine building work, it definitely gets way more intricate. But in terms of this car, it was more so like I replaced both of the fuel pumps, all 4 of the upper and lower fuel filters. I was doing OEM steel braided lines, replaced all those from Lamborghini. I did all the rubber hoses pretty much on the whole car just to remove that variable that maybe some were dry rotted or failed. I replaced a ton of clamps and miscellaneous fasteners, and went through a lot of things that could have definitely been an issue in the future. All the fluids, of course. Gave everything a really good shakedown, and I was pleased with the condition of the car, and I was totally prepared to do any amount of that work just to make the car right. So after a number of trips, I even personally drove out to Evans Automotive. They're like the go-to for cars like this. They actually still work on quite a few of them, which is awesome. I believe his name is Tim. Great deal of help to me. They were able to get me parts from Italy super fast at a good price. So I relied on them quite a bit for not only information, but especially parts. And it is like the only car that like truly like intimidates me to drive. It's very big. Like when you're in it, you can feel how wide the back end is. your visibility isn't as bad as you think it is, but it's still like a worrisome drive. I mean, the car it's not so much that it's expensive. I have had a Lamborghini before, but you mentally take into account the difficulty it is to replace something on the car, who you're driving around, you know, what type of risk you're putting the car in, what type of, you know, scenarios and how bad the roads are, and you try to forget all that and just enjoy the car, which is I've been able to quite a few times this year, and definitely far more times than probably the normal Diablo owner does. Some of these are probably sitting in a warehouse somewhere. So that's the basic rundown of the car. I do have some more things to do that I'd like to button up, but I was able to source a couple of the originally optioned Lamborghini luggage cases. There's like a suit bag, and there's an actual suitcase. So now I'm just missing 2 of the 4, but I was super fortunate to be able to find those. One was in Florida from a guy who said his dad was a mechanic at Lamborghini, and he just collected memorabilia. And then the other one got posted on Marketplace locally, which is crazy. It ended up being a guy that worked on Ferraris. He was like a service manager. And I met up with him, and I was like, dude, I have to have it. I messaged him. I was like, can I come now? He's like, tomorrow's fine. And I was like, sorry, you know, it's the middle of the night, but I gotta have this thing. So yeah, I was able to source a couple of the luggage items, which is, I love stuff like that. You know, vintage apparel and, you know, old racing stuff and jackets and shirts, like team apparel and hats. So I'm actually waiting on the hat that Mike Tyson wore to the Lamborghini factory back in the 90s, because he was a supercar guy back then. And there's a bunch of pictures that you can see him, you know, in his Lamborghini or at the factory. So I found the hat that he was wearing, and I was able to find the seller, get in contact with him, and I ended up picking it up from Austria. So that should be here too. I'm pretty excited about that. But just going over the car, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And I mean, just even like these little carbon spoilers that go on the windshield wipers. I mean, stupidly expensive, but stupidly cool. Like, I remember when I first saw one of these, that was like the first thing I noticed. I'm like, oh my gosh. But don't lose one. Too much money. You can look it up if you want. You can look up anything on this car, and then you can be like, wow, that's stupid. And some of it is, but I think all of us car guys are stupid to some extent. So yeah, this is my car.